All right, good evening, everyone. We're just about to get underway here. Thank you all for joining us, and the room is filling up quickly. We have over 2,500 people pre-registered, and I'm sure more to come. Our webinar room only holds 1,000, so everyone else that doesn't get into the first 1,000 ends up watching on YouTube Live. So to those of you that are now watching on YouTube Live, welcome as well. And looks like that was real quick. We've hit our 1,000 already. So it's a full house, and we're excited to cover the next step here. My name is Kevin Cavanaugh. I'm the Executive Director of Mass Hockey, and we've got a great panel here tonight to share a lot of information with you. I'm going to hand it over to our President, Bob Joyce, right away, and let's get underway.
Thank you, Kevin. Good evening and welcome to our webinar on games returning to the rink. As Kevin said, my name is Bob Joyce. I'm the president of Massachusetts Hockey. In addition to Kevin Cavanaugh, our executive director from Massachusetts Hockey, we have Tom Smith, our safety committee chair, Kevin Donovan, our USA referee in chief for Massachusetts. And we're also joined by members of the Hockey Reopening Committee, Rob McBride from FMC Sports, Paul Gilmartin from the Valley League, and Wes Tuttle, the general manager of the New England Sports Center. As you're aware, last Thursday, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs issued new guidance authorizing playing games under certain modifications. Mass Hockey and the members of the Rink Reopening Committee have been working with the Commonwealth for quite some time to develop a safe and appropriate way for returning to games. While the Rink Reopening Committee provided a proposal to the state, which ultimately provided for removing checking, ultimately the formal guidance was issued by the state. Mass Hockey is the governing body that governs youth hockey played under USA Hockey rules and sanctioned play. We do not have the oversight or authority to take any enforcement actions related to these rules. We're here tonight simply to try to help educate and inform the hockey community. The interpretation and enforcement of these rules will be the responsibility of our rink partners, the Commonwealth, and local boards of health. I'm a hockey parent, a coach, and a player. And like many of you, I have questions about this guidance and the regulations. Hopefully we can try to address them through our panel tonight in this webinar. We're expecting further sport-specific guidance for hockey, which may clarify and or modify the current guidelines. We don't have that right now, but we will publish any updates when they are available. Now, we've heard from many of you and understand that there are many different opinions out there on these rules and guidance. I want to emphasize that these rules have been put in place to allow for scrimmages and games in Massachusetts during COVID-19. I understand that many of you have been frustrated by this process and question why any modifications are needed. Similarly, there's many of you that are still uncomfortable with returning to the rinks, even with the protocols in place. Ultimately, each family must make their own determination on what they see best for their own situation. Mass Hockey's website will continue to provide information as it becomes available. The state has issued COVID-related checklists that you'll hear about later for both facilities and activity organizers that should be reviewed, will need to be certified by both rinks as well as programs. In addition, we will be posting stuff related to COVID-related waivers for players, coach, managers, and volunteers. One thing I can emphasize is that in order for this to work, we need players, coaches, and parents to continue to be vigilant and comply with the rules and requirements to the best of their ability. If your child is not feeling well, exhibiting symptoms, missing a game or two or a practice, it's not going to derail their hockey career. We need to use common sense to get through this safely. Now, we've disabled the chat feature tonight. We'll leave some time at the end for questions and answers. Hopefully, we'll be able to conclude this webinar by 7:55 tonight in order to allow people to switch over and watch the Bruins game. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Tom Smith, the chair of the Massachusetts Safety Committee.
Thank you, Bob. My name is Thomas Smith, and I have the privilege of being the chairperson of the Massachusetts Hockey Safety Committee. When this pandemic started, there was never a question of if hockey would return. It would just be a matter of when. However, we all knew that when that time would come, hockey would be given a new normal given COVID-19. And here we are today. As of today, rinks can host games and we are now in our new normal for what hockey will look like in the foreseeable future. And with that, it's important to recognize how we got here. There have been thousands, if not tens of thousands of hours put in over the last few months by members on this call, as well as many other members of Massachusetts hockey and those within our hockey family and community. And I can assure you that with each conversation that we've had with the state and Commonwealth of Massachusetts, safety has been on the forefront and of the utmost importance for every single person who enters and exits a hockey rink. But it's important to remember that hockey is a privilege, it's not a right. And with our group working with the governor's office and the folks of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we now have that privilege back. However, now it's on us and every single person affiliated with hockey to keep it that way. If we as a group do not do our part together and practice the safety guidelines to a T, our privilege will be taken away. This falls on myself, members of this call, rink owners, leagues, teams, parents, coaches, officials, spectators, and last but certainly not least, the players, to make sure all, and by all, I mean every single safety guideline is followed to a T, so we do not take 10 steps backwards and lose that privilege to play our sport. We are all in this together, but we need to remember from a safety standpoint, we all need to look out for one another. And given the guidelines issued by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we feel that we are in a very good position to resume hockey in the safest way possible given COVID-19. As your Massachusetts Hockey Safety Chair, I promise that we have done and will do everything within our power to keep every single person safe at all times when entering and exiting a hockey rink and the duration of the time that they're there. It is up to our entire membership, as well as every single person in the hockey community, to use common sense, practice social distancing, wear a mask, respect one another, and understand that these protocols have been put into place to keep everyone as safe as possible. And we ask that you follow these protocols to a T. This disease is very serious and something that we do not want to shut down our sport again. And with that, I'd like to introduce our Executive Director of Massachusetts Hockey, Kevin Kavanaugh.
Thanks, Tom and Bob and everyone else. And most importantly, thanks to what looks like almost over 2,500 people at this point between the webinar and YouTube Live watching us this evening. So there's a lot of interest in what the game is going to look like going forward. That's a great thing. And we hope that there's a lot of understanding that while it might not be exactly what everyone wants, that's going to be a theme here tonight. It is what we have, and it is what the state has asked us to do. So in order to ensure that we have the opportunity to play a modified game, as Bob and Tom and everyone else will say, we're asking everyone's compliance and just understanding as we work to get to the next levels. And that would be a return to a more normal situation for our games. So a couple things I'll hit on in the beginning, and I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about just what the games themselves might look like. Some definitions that I just want to make sure people understand, because the state is very specific, and there are some documents on our website, checklists that are responsible for both programs and facilities to check off and post. Most of you have seen these in other businesses that you've been through in the last month or so. So those attestations are important. The facility operator, that definition is the rink and its staff. So those who run the rinks, the Zamboni drivers, the front desk people, anyone who's responsible for the upkeep and running of the rink on a day-to-day basis, those are your facility operators. And then the other definition is the activity organizer. And that one is a little more wide-reaching. And that ultimately is whoever is purchasing the ice from the facility. So in the case of games, you're talking about a situation where it's likely going to be a league. Most leagues are responsible for purchasing the ice from the facilities and tell their league members where to show up, when to show up, and how to show up. But in the case of our programs, the practices, most times just the local association or program that's buying the ice, they then become the activity organizer. So our programs are going to be responsible for signing that same attestation, which is, again, online and will be emailed to all of our contacts with programs throughout the state. But we just want to make sure everyone understands those definitions, and then ultimately sometimes who the responsibility falls onto for the various ways of keeping our sport safe. So what does the new game look like? The modified game, most importantly, I think to a section of our membership, is that the removal of checking has occurred. There's no more body checking at this time allowed in any age group. But the reality is most of our ages already play a non-checking game. All of our girls and women's divisions do that, as well as our 12 and under ages as well. So plenty of games will not be changing significantly from that perspective. Face coverings, that's one that we are, as Bob mentioned, talking about additional guidance from the state. Right now, as everyone mostly has read, the state is asking that we wear face coverings during face-offs and on the benches. Our sport-specific request and guidance is to remove the face covering requirement at both the face-offs and on the benches, but we don't have that official from the state yet. So fingers crossed we will, but at this time, that is what is being requested. I know a lot of questions out there talk about how feasible it is for a kid to be able to pull up a face covering while they're on the bench. It's not, again, ideal, but it is what's required today. And we hope that that requirement is peeled back, especially when we talk about our bench area. And that's another area where the state felt very strongly that spreading the kids out to the best of their ability is something that helps mitigate the spread of the disease. So the bench area that we have been asked to have a 6-foot distance between players on the bench. In a lot of cases, when you have a 10 to 12 player roster, probably not a major issue. For those who have a full 20 player roster, those benches are going to be a little bit extended out, and the facilities ultimately are going to have to kind of create the way that that's going to look. A lot of rinks can do that. They're going to have to rope off some areas, put either benches or chairs at some distance and create that situation. But it's not something that's negotiable at this point, especially if we don't require masks on the bench eventually. That distancing is very important to the state in our discussions with them. Locker rooms. Locker rooms are currently allowed to be open. Ultimately, it's the facility's choice if they choose to do so. And if they do, they're going to be responsible for ensuring that they operate at a maximum 50% capacity and that they're following the cleanliness and guidance from the state on sanitization of those locker rooms. So again, that's a facility choice as it has been if they choose to open those rooms. I know many facilities haven't done it at this point. And even with games coming, many may choose to keep it that way just for a safety factor. We talked about the intentional contact and the removal of intentional contact with checking. The other task is to minimize intermittent contact, and that's the phrase that the state has used as well. In order to do that, coaches, we're going to ask you to continually remind your players that when the whistle blows, separate immediately. We don't want scrums in front of the net. We don't want kids hanging out and talking smack to each other, as sometimes does happen in those games. We want them to separate and remove themselves in a timely manner. Officials are going to be asked to blow a whistle sooner than they typically would at times, especially on the boards. So we don't have a big pile up of 4 or 5 bodies, and then we want the game to keep moving. But at the same time, that whistle will blow quicker than you're used to seeing probably. Kevin Donovan is on the call here as our referee in chief in Massachusetts, and he will speak a little bit more to that later on. Spectators is another big one. Right now, the state is allowing 1 spectator per player, regardless of a practice or a game. So that's something that facilities are going to navigate as well. And it's just, it's one of the rules. It's a way that the state is doing their best to limit gatherings and try and, again, get us to a place where the COVID-19 virus is no longer a major part of what we're dealing with. With that comes contact tracing, and I'll let both Paul Gilmartin and Rob McBride talk a little bit more about that from a facility standpoint. Again, ultimately, contact tracing is going to fall on the responsibility of primarily the facility, but we're going to ask our programs to work hand in hand with the facilities to ensure that we know who's in the building at any given time. Some of the rinks might ask a program coming in for a game to give a list of names of parents who will be there, and it could just be as simple as a checklist that someone on the team is responsible for checking off names as parents come in and handing it to the rink. But ultimately, the facility will be in charge of any contact tracing and providing information. So we do have additional guidance from USA Hockey that is, again, on our website and will be emailed out to everyone that talks about some suggestions for programs and how they may want to set up their COVID tracking within their program. It's not a requirement, but it is a strongly, strongly recommended concept to follow, and that language is all available on our website. And I think back to some general guidelines on what the games and practices might look like. Coaches, continue to remind your players to separate themselves. I talked about that. We want to be very safe on the ice. It won't look pretty, especially in the beginning. The elongated benches and kids trying to get on the ice, off the ice, they're going to bump into each other. They're going to be around each other. We have to do our best to make an effort to make this work. They said it's going to be tough. Kids will get used to it over time, and hopefully it doesn't last too long. That's part of the goal here as well. If we do everything the right way, eventually these numbers will continue to get better, and as a result, restrictions will be loosened. In as simple terms as I can make, let's not screw it up. Your teammates are counting on you, your program is counting on you, your league is counting on you, the state is counting on you. Each and every one of us need to do a good job making sure that if our kids don't feel well, we keep them home. If there's an exposure situation, sit out the 2 weeks if that's what happens. We are going to have infections. There are going to be small outbreaks. That's just what life is showing us right now. So let's make sure we limit those. Let's control them, and let's do our best. Bob talked about this as well. Mass Hockey is here to help share all of this information and provide guidance. We're not the enforcement agency. These are not Massachusetts or USA Hockey rules by definition. And as a result, the state supersedes us. We trust the state as the expert on this, and we're working with them to ensure our best cooperation. So with that, I'm going to hand the microphone over, for lack of a better term, to Rob McBride and Paul Gilmartin. They'll speak a little bit before Wes Tuttle joins, and appreciate everyone joining in tonight.
Great. Thanks very much, Kevin. Liz, could I get the PowerPoint popped up?
Yes, you can. Hold on one moment.
Thank you. So we're gonna, in this next part, Paul and I are gonna walk you through the off the ice new world that we're gonna be looking at and kind of take you through some of the main parts of it. And Paul's gonna touch on, as a league operator, he's gonna touch on their different challenges and how they're going to approach those. So next slide, Liz. I'm just seeing black.
Same here.
Sorry, hold on.
Sorry, Bob. Thank you. Okay, so phase 3, step 1, expansion of activities is what we are kicking off today. And I just want to preface this, Kevin touched on it a little bit as well. Every rink is unique. And what the state has done is develop guidance that puts the responsibility on us as facility operators and programmers and organizers to figure out how we are going to implement the guidance and how we're going to make sure that the key aspects of this are done, given the fact that each one of us is dealing with different facilities and different issues. So there's some flexibility in here, and I want to make sure we're all aware of that. Different rinks are going to do things differently, and the goal here is to make sure we're all doing it well and we're all doing it safe. But that's going to be some of the challenges. So rinks are allowed to open for all ages and activities except for tournaments. Only outdoor tournaments in lower risk sports are allowed right now. In order for us to allow games, we have to comply with the game modifications that Kevin outlined for you. It's the rink's responsibility in working with our organizers to ensure the guidance is enforced. It's our duty as facility operators through our local board of health to make sure that we are doing everything that's required in this guidance. It's our responsibility. And as organizers and participants, as everyone's mentioned, it's also your responsibility to cooperate with us and do everything in our power to make sure our facilities and our game is safe. We are subject to the local board of health for approvals and additional requirements. And I can tell you in our situation, because we have so many facilities, we find different levels of engagement in our boards of health. Some have been very engaged in coming out to the site and working with us. Some are a little more hands off. And I'm aware of one that is interpreting the guidance, not in one of our facilities, but in a different facility, interpreting the guidance probably stricter than it should be. And you're going to see that as you go from rink to rink. There's going to be different levels of requirements passed on by the local board of health. Snack shops may be able to open if they comply with the state restaurant guidance. Vending machines will be operated and available in most facilities. Water bubblers are allowed and water fill stations are allowed. That slide's that's incorrect, but they are allowed. Whether the facility is going to open them up or not is going to be a rink by rink determination. Skate shops can open up under the state retail guidance, and many rinks we'll probably see their shops opening up. You'll see shops opening up in the rinks. Team rooms are open, as Kevin mentioned, only up to 50% capacity. So in facilities like ours that have smaller team rooms, you're going to have to rotate through. And one group's going to go in and get changed. They're going to come out, and the next group's going to get in. And that's just the way we're going to have to make it work. We are still, and many rinks are still going to strongly encourage players to come dressed as much as possible to the game. And the point here isn't to cause any inconvenience. The point is to keep the potential for close proximity to an absolute minimum. So coming dressed, I know it can be a pain in the neck for some folks, but if you can do it, we really would appreciate it. And let's keep the amount of people in team rooms to a minimum. Showers will remain closed throughout this phase, and indoor common areas like lobbies, bleachers, restrooms will be open, but social distancing is required. So anytime you come into an ice rink facility, you better have a mask on or a face covering on, and you better be socially distanced, whether you're in the bleachers, whether you're in the lobby area, wherever it might be in the facility. Next slide, please, Liz. Okay, team benches, kind of covered this already, but the requirements for 6 foot distancing between players. So in some of our facilities, we have double benches front and back. So we're staggering the placement of players on those benches. We're marking out spots to make sure they're 6 feet apart. And most benches, you're going to see either 5, 6, or 7 players are going to fit in that new configuration. And then we're going to have to expand boxes outside or seating outside the boxes to accommodate the rest of the players. It's not ideal, and it's going to present some issues for coaches, but it's the way we have to do it. The other option that may be open for some ice rinks with their local board of health approval is to erect dividers between players to separate players, whether it's plexiglass or some other type of partition to create separation between players. But again, that's going to be local boards of health that determine whether you can do that or not. Only one player can use the penalty box at a time. So if there's more than one penalty at the same time, the first player in the box stays in the box, and the second player serves their penalty out on the team bench. So we don't have more than one player in a penalty box at a time. Spectators are limited to 1 parent, guardian, or chaperone per participant, up to 40% of the rink's occupant capacity, which I think most of us are going to be in pretty good shape with this. That's the limiting factor, is going to be the 1 parent or guardian per participant. No spectators allowed for participants 21 years or older. No non-essential visitors. Access to the office and the equipment storage has to be by employees only. So if you're a youth hockey association and you have some stored equipment at the rink, you're going to have the rink employee get that equipment out for you. Restrooms are set up for distancing. If you've been in any of FMC rinks, you know that we are closing every other sink, we're closing every other stall, every other urinal, and we're limiting the capacity of the rooms based on that. And that capacity has to be posted outside the room, each one of the restrooms. Designated entrance and exits with one-way traffic aisles to create distancing, and we're all familiar with this protocol now, but most of us are able to do that with our front entrance, separating the enter side and the exit side, and separating our lobby with traffic flows, so you can get right in and get right to the ice surface without with a minimum amount of proximity to other people. Can I see the next slide, please, Liz? Face coverings are required for everyone, participants, coaches, spectators, and staff. There may be some guidance coming out that, as Kevin mentioned, that will allow players or participants to remove their face coverings during the game, during the course of the game, and not have to wear them on the bench. But as it stands right now, every single person entering the building has to have a face covering on at all times. And I'll tell you, some boards of health are enforcing that diligently in some cities and towns. Signage at the entrance and throughout the rink is required so you're gonna see these. You've been seeing them in other types of establishments, just to make sure everyone continues to remember to social distance, keep your face covering on. Participants, coaches, spectators, and staff must show no signs of COVID-19 symptoms for 14 days. High-risk persons are discouraged from attending the rink as participants, spectators, or employees. And in FMC, we have a significant number of employees that are not able to come back to work at this point because they are in high-risk categories. Frequent cleaning and sanitizing of high-use areas and touch surfaces is required, as well as logging that so we can prove that we are doing our due diligence as far as sanitizing the facility. And a lot of ice rinks, in ours, we are using electrostatic fogging equipment that puts a sanitizer on virtually every surface in the building, and within 4 seconds it kills COVID-19 and a whole bunch of other things as well. So it's very effective. If any person attending the rink tests positive for COVID-19, and as Kevin and Bob both mentioned, it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. It's just, that's the world we're living in right now. So it's how we respond to it, how well we do in enforcing the protocols is going to determine how the outcome of that situation is. So a rink must be deep cleaned. If we have a test, positive test, must be deep cleaned and sanitized prior to any further use. So you have to shut the establishment down and deep clean and sanitize it. The rink, in cooperation with the organizer, must contact their local board of health and supply a list of all contacts who've been in proximity with the person testing positive. And in some cases, the Board of Health is going to do the contact tracing. In some cases, they're going to work with us as a facility operator to do the contact tracings together and certify that we've contacted every person, put them on notice. Anyone who's in contact with that, with the person who tested positive, either has to get a test to prove that they're negative, or has to sit out for 14 days before they can come back to the facility. The person should not return to the rink or play until their symptoms have gone and they have tested negative. Is there one more slide, Liz, or is that?
I believe that's the last slide.
Okay, you can pull that down. And I'm going to turn it over to Paul Gilmartin from Valley League and Valley Sports to go over some other facility type issues and to talk about leagues and the challenges that he's facing. Paul.
Hi, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. And yeah, from Valley Associates perspective, we just want to talk about where we're going now with the start of league games, and the fact that league games are now going to be allowed, and games across the state are going to be allowed effective today. Actually, we are seeing that a lot of people are excited and ready to get back onto the ice, and as are we. I think what a lot of people don't quite understand, or there's a misperception, is that most of the rinks now have been operating for 2 months, and to operate and run a league game is really, to be quite honest, kind of a lower bar to hurdle than some of the stuff we've been doing over the last 2 months. For the last 2 months, we've had teams in, and we've been allowed to operate with cohorts of 20 to 25 players, separated by more than 20 feet. So what we've been seeing now is, skills and summer camps, and I'm sure a lot of you have been to the rinks and seen this. Some of you that haven't should understand that, the facilities have now, and throughout phase 2, we shut down the locker rooms. We've allowed players to come in dressed, put on their skates in the front row of the bleachers at most facilities, and every facility is going to be different, and then take their bags across, go to the bench, and there's been 40 to 50 seats lined up all along the back walls. So there is a safe way, and we've been doing this now for almost 60 days or a little bit longer, allowing players to come in, operate and skate in a very safe environment, and go home. And from our perspective, we've had no positive cases throughout that period. So I want to be people feel a little more safe in that if we can bring 40, 50 players in through a given hour, the ability to bring in 12 players, 15 players per team, so 30 players an hour is actually an easier task. We've got the facility set up now, and we're going to be sitting down and working with every facility operator that we work with within the Valley League. So I can talk specifically about the Valley League, but I know there's multiple other leagues around, and there's leagues in the South Shore, there's club leagues and tier 1 leagues. But from our perspective, we're going to be working with the 58 rink operators that we deal with, and understand that each facility has to set up a protocol that works for that environment. And you have to understand that from rink to rink and week to week, things may change. But what we've been able to do, like I said, is in Haverhill, we have them set up where they get dressed in the first row of the bleachers and chairs on the opposite sides. In Hockeytown, we have something different. In Lawrence and Malden, and we're doing this across the board, and all these other facilities are as well. But they're setting up an environment where the kids can come in, utilize, and every facility might be different in that some places are allowing half of the players to get dressed in the locker room. They come out, the other half goes in and gets out. Other places will say, okay, a team can have 2 locker rooms, but they have to remove themselves after that time period and get undressed on the other side of the facility. But all this stuff is working, and it's working pretty well. And all the facilities are coming in, and as Rob said, we're using electrostatic cleaners to come in and clean down and make sure that the entire locker room and the entire bench area is clean after each 30 minutes of usage. So these are different protocols that each rink is putting into place, and we're going to make sure that they're in place at each rink that we use in the league. I think everybody should feel safe that we're coming back to hockey, and we're doing it in a very safe manner that allows the kids to get out, exercise, play the sport they love, but also do it in a very safe manner. So I do feel as though we're getting off on the right foot here, and I think we've got 2 to 3 weeks to ramp this up before the season really kicks off after Labor Day, and I feel confident that between ourselves, all the other rink operators and Mass Hockey, we're in a very, very good place. I know a lot of people are concerned about some of the game protocol, and unfortunately, it's great for all the young players, which is 70% of the players that play this in hockey in Massachusetts. Yes, I understand there's the bantams and the midgets and the people that don't want to play no check hockey, but I think this is a better alternative than not playing hockey at all. And I think it gets us back to a place where the kids can get out and play the game they love, and hopefully we may see a change in that in the next 30, 60, 90 days. We can't promise anything at this point in time, but I think living within the rules and protocols that are in place. I know people get upset and they're looking for, well, why can't we have this, or why can't we have no mask? But the bottom line is we've done the best we can, this entire group, along with Mass Hockey, and we've really pushed this issue as hard as we can with the state. And this is the point that we've reached where we can get back and play the game we love, and this is the best case scenario. If things change and things improve, that would be fantastic. But I think people need to understand that this is the opportunity that we have today, and hopefully everybody can live and abide by these rules, because it is important that we all do in order for us to continue to play this game. And if people are unwilling to live by the rules and protocols, what's going to happen is we're going to end up in a situation where, and you've all seen it, whether it's a restaurant or a retail space, they get closed down because they're not living by the rules of the game relative to the state. So I think it's important that everybody understands and everybody educates the people within their program and within their organization, so that we're all on the same page. We're all doing this by the rules, and we're all on the same page, and therefore we can all proceed forward, and hopefully we get to the next level, which will change a lot of things that we're looking at today.
Thanks, Paul. I guess, Wes, we're going to talk to you a little bit, and you're going to talk to us about a multi-sheet facility and what you deal with out in Marlboro, and what other multi-sheet facilities probably would do in a best case scenario for controlling the environment, for lack of a better term. So if you want to share what you guys are doing, that'd be great.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for everybody's hard work in getting us to this point. It's really rewarding to be able to get the game back. I look forward to having each of you here at the Sports Center. To Kevin's point, what we've done is isolated each rink by rink number, provided an entrance and an exit for each rink where you sign in and sign out. We'll continue to do that. Presently, we have 4 rinks open. We're going to open the rest of them up, and some of the training rinks. But going forward, it'll be much similar to what you've been used to, face coverings in the parking lot. It's critically important you pay attention to the guidelines that all of the other committee members have talked about, and that can continue to lead to our success. We're going to enhance the bench areas and move forward, and hope to build on the success that we've had for the 10 or 12 weeks.
Thank you, Wes. Now I would ask Kevin Donovan to speak about referees.
Thanks, Bob. Just want to make the point to everyone, Kevin Cavanaugh has given some good points, and Paul with regards to, getting the game back. And that's what we're trying to do here. As far as the rules that are going to be happening, we're not reinventing the rule book. All we're doing is that we're taking the rules that are already in the book for the lower levels and now bringing them up to the bantam and midget level. So that checking that the players used to play at a lower age and that the officials are already doing, we're just now going to call that at all levels, similar to the girls' hockey, the women's hockey. So we look at that. So it's not a change of the rules. It's just enforcing the rules to all standards. Now, officials have been asking about with regards to face coverings and things like that. So officials will be required to wear face coverings at all times while they're on the ice. So as soon as you come into the rink, you're going to be wearing your face covering. Coming into the rink, you're in the locker room, please, social distance with your partners in the locker room, and then out to the rink wearing the face coverings. As we talked about right now, if games were to start, the centers would be required to wear face coverings. We'll see what happens with regards to any specific rules to hockey. It's not the officials' responsibility to monitor the benches with face coverings. That's the coaches. So coaches will be taking care of their players on the bench if face coverings still are required for them at all times. So that is not our duty. I would just say to the coaches and the parents, everybody out there, let's work together on this. This is going to be some times of change with regards to the way you may see the game called, with some quicker whistles. This is all for protection, not to eliminate body contact, right? That's going to happen. We know that, but we're not going to let those players gather. We're going to blow that whistle probably a little bit early. So you may hear some whistling, you may hear the puck may be loose, but that's going to be part of the process right now so we can play. So I would just say respect that. We talked about the penalty benches and everything else like that. So remember, for the officials, if you don't, coaches, we're all going to work all together with this. If there's somebody already in the box, that additional player, if you call a penalty, that player will be going to the player's bench at that time. So the checkings, so if people are going to be delivering body checks, that's a penalty. So they're going to get the minor penalty. If somebody gets hurt, we have the major in games. So those are already rules that are in the rule book. So we'll just continue to enforce those throughout all ages. We have sent, if there's officials on there, we sent a survey out last week, I think Friday night. If you haven't answered that, please do. We're trying to secure electronic whistles in bulk. We will acquire them and just sell them at cost. I know that they're very difficult to get right now, or the prices of them have been marked up. So if we get a good response, we'll try to acquire them. Mass Hockey will have them posted on the website and send them to you. So if you haven't answered that survey, please do. I've answered a bunch of questions through the chat and everything else. So if you do have any questions or anything else like that, our massofficials.com webpage has everything else like that. We're going through our seminars. So if there's officials out there that haven't registered yet, go ahead, register. Hockey's back. We're running our seminars, so they're up and running already. So we're looking forward to a good season. I would just say this: if you're not comfortable as an official getting on the ice, no assigner or anybody is going to hold that against you. You have to feel comfortable with yourself and protecting your family and loved ones. So no one's going to hold it against you if you're not comfortable at this time. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to myself or any of my staff. We have 24 district supervisors that will be up to date on everything.
Thanks, Kev. Great job there. And thank you to everyone for your presentation so far. Now we'll get into the fun part, which is some question and answer. And Kev, to jump on what you just said about the electronic whistle. We'll make those available as well to coaches who want to use them at practice. So you've got access in bulk, we think close to 1,000 of those. So we'll get that put up on our website and people can start to order them from us directly, just so we can keep that going forward, hopefully. And that's a great thing for all of our coaches to be able to use as well in practice. And on that note, that's kind of the first question I'm going to tackle, is a lot of questions about the size of the practice ice, meaning how many kids you can have on the ice, and cohorts and things of that nature. So first point, the cohort size of 10 that's referred to in the state guidance refers to those groups who are limited to level 2. We have been able to get to level 3, which includes games. And as a result, the limit is 25 players on a playing surface. The interpretation that we're using is that the playing surface is a larger playing area. And in that guidance, it specifies that you can have more than one group of 25 on a larger playing surface, provided that you have a 14-foot distance between them. So in theory, you could have 2 groups of 25, including your coaches, on the ice for a practice, and that would work. One caveat to that, that's our interpretation of the playing surface. The local board of health may have a stricter version of that, and they have the ability to enforce that at the local level, but we have not seen any challenges to that or any issues to that so far. So again, 25 is the group. Now, one more thing to remember there, a lot of practices, you might have 2 teams on the ice and both teams get thrown together for some line drills before you separate out. These rules require that those groups are separated from the beginning through the end. So each team stays with itself. So however you want to divide the ice as a program at your practice, do so, whether it's across the red line or lengthwise, you have your choice on that, but limit yourself to that number. A lot of questions on face shields, and will the bubble masks, for lack of a better term, be counted as a face covering? And the answer to that, to start with, is no, but there are a lot of questions about the splash guard. I know Bauer is coming out with the splash guard for their concept mask. I know that CCM is coming out with a piece as well. Both of those pieces probably aren't going to be to market until late September, early October is our guess. We are going to get some guidance from the state on whether or not those will pass the test for being a face covering, and we're optimistic that they would be at that point. Let that be clear, though. We're not saying you need a bubble mask to play hockey. We're simply saying that potentially could serve as a face covering. So hopefully that answers some of those questions. And I'll start to scroll down here. We buried the lead, Rob, on one of your slides. We talked about that spectators are only allowed for those below the age of 21. That means that if you're 21 or over, and thus the beer league and the adult leagues, you're allowed to play. Within these rules and this context, you're allowed to play again. So hopefully a lot of our adult league people are happy and excited to be able to get back on the ice and see the guys again and have some fun with that. So let's see here. Waivers, pre-skate health screening, contact tracing. I think we covered a lot of that. We know who the responsibility falls on. We've covered that. Let's see here. Protocols for someone testing positive. Rob, you did a great job covering that. This is good. We covered a lot of the questions, which I'm happy to see. One person's asking if we don't just mandate face coverings across the board, we remove any consideration for that. The state has not put that level of guidance in, and there are certainly studies out there that are concerning to people about wearing a face covering while exercising. And as a result, we're not going to take that step and mandate those face coverings to be worn at all times. We're simply going to trust the state as the experts in this area to provide us with the guidance. Hybrid face-off question. Follow men's league procedure and loser takes it out and the attacking team's top of the circles. Let's hope we don't have to go and down that path. I think wearing the face coverings at a face-off, if that is removed, then our traditional face-off structure does work. In our request to the state, we know that the defensemen are distanced already. The wings will be distanced as well. They'll have a 6-foot distance between them, as well as them and the centerman. And then the goal would be that the official would bring the 2 centermen together at the last minute, basically say, here, bring the guys in, drop the puck, and away we go. Again, trying to limit as much intermittent contact as possible on those. Let's see here. Bob, tournaments. A lot of questions about tournaments and what they look like. There's some specific guidance, but do you want to kind of tackle that for a moment and just answer questions on what's allowed and what's not?
Tournaments, as we traditionally know of them, are not allowed. Anything that it requires players advancing and playing multiple numbers of games over a certain period of time are not permitted. That said, pre-scheduled games against identified opponents are permitted. It's just the idea is that you don't want to play multiple games against multiple opponents in a short period of time. So our understanding at this point is you can have pre-scheduled games and can play 2 games a day at times, but they must, provided there's appropriate time distance between those 2 games and that your opponents are preset beforehand.
Thank you. Hopefully that gets some decent understanding out there. Let's see here, other questions. So there are no size limits beyond the standard 20-player roster as long as they're spaced out on the bench per the guidelines. That is correct. There's no shortening of rosters. Certainly, programs may choose to do so. There may be fewer players playing by definition right now. Again, I think, Kevin, you hit it with the officials, and we've touched on this with the players. If you're not comfortable and you're not safe in your mind coming to the arena, that's okay. Stay home, relax. You'll get your chance to come as things start to get better. So we're not trying to encourage everyone to come to the rink and play games. We're simply trying to create a situation where those who are comfortable doing so are able to. And I think that's important for everyone to just not lose track of. So
Kevin, can I address from a league standpoint, a couple of things.
Please do.
One, we already saw some games that occurred today. And, the standard size of most rosters, we're not dealing, and this is not to address the, tier 1 U18 team that has 20 players. The average roster size that we see is 13, 14 skaters at most, sometimes 15. I've never seen a peewee or a square team that has more than 15 skaters on the bench. So, the point is what we're seeing now usually is you've got 5 players and a goalie on the ice. You're usually looking at, 8 players on the bench. We've been able to extend the benches to the point where you've got 5 or 6 on the bench, 2 or 3 extra chairs. You've got most players 6 feet apart. It's really been pretty easy to do. And I know people act, and I've heard people talk about how they're going to get on the ice and how we're going to get around. It's once you see it and you actually get involved in it and you're sitting on the bench, you'll realize the next 5 up are on the bench. You got the 3 forwards on the front end door, the 2 defensemen on the back end door. You might have 2 more players sitting in a chair on the side. It's very easy to accommodate. It's very easy for us to achieve. And I think people are getting a little bit too hung up on all these problems that are occurring within the game environment. So I do feel as though this is something that's very easy to accommodate, very easy for teams to achieve. And, I want everybody to understand that, it's not that hard and it's not going to be that onerous when you actually see it at work. So hopefully everybody understands that and gets a better feel once they see how this works within the environment.
Great, thanks, Paul.
And one more thing on the contact tracing, as you had said, we are going to, from the Battle League's perspective and a lot of other leagues, we've talked to all of them, we are going to require everybody to register and roster their teams before they step on the ice. And it's not that hard to do. Everything's now electronic these days. It doesn't require, paper. It doesn't require, getting everybody to go sign on one single document. So what we're going to require is before people step on the ice, fill out the rosters, get your entire team listed, get them online. And at that point in time, as soon as the team steps on the ice, we know everybody that's on that team. We know everybody that's in the building. And we're going to limit it to 1 spectator per player. So we know that the Guardian is there. So we know who's in the building. And it allows us to do very, very easily identifiable contact tracing. And it can happen in moments. So it's going to be really important that everybody within your organizations, if there's program directors in the line here and coaches, it's going to be important that you ask everybody to comply and comply immediately. We can't be chasing people in October, November, and December. This is going to be required up front. And what it's going to do then is it's going to make all of this much more easy for everybody involved, for all of us to feel safe and feel like we're in a good and safe environment. So that's going to be the one thing that we require. And again, it takes 5 minutes of everybody's time just to go do it.
Thanks, Paul. And I think to follow that up, our registrars for all of our programs have seen or should have seen there's an update to the roster requirement dates this year from Mass Hockey. So we're expecting rosters to be turned in by a certain date, and that's all published online. I'm going to throw this back to Rob and Paul. We've got a couple questions about locker rooms and signage for the capacities. If there's going to be a 50% capacity, you have the ability to put the number of players allowed into a room on that. So is that something you guys can do?
I'll tell you how we're doing it, because there's a few different ways to do it. You can do 9 square feet per person standing, or you can do linear length of your benches, which is what we're doing, and dividing them up by 20 inches per player, and then half of that capacity is what the room is rated for. So if normally we would be able to hold 20 in a room, given that bench length, then now we can have 10 at any given time. We're chalking the doors open, so players and coaches aren't touching the doors, aren't touching the door handles. They're going in, sitting on the bench, getting changed. Hopefully they're just putting their skates on in a lot of cases, and then getting right out of the room, and the next group's coming in, and social distancing in between that. Paul, pretty much.
Yeah, and I
posting
can
that?
talk about some of the things that we're doing in the building. So this week we started to allow teams to use locker rooms. Prior to that, we were not. What we're doing is giving each team in most buildings, and things change from building to building because logistically everything isn't the same. But what we're doing is putting one team per 2 locker rooms. So you're now looking at 7 players per room. And then at that point, they can then take their bags, go out and bring them over to the bench area once they're dressed. And we clean that room, and we use the electrostatic cleaners to clean the room. And they are then getting undressed all along the walls. That allows them to sit in 20, 30 different seats. And in other situations, what we're requiring is, sorry guys, I apologize. Doorbell at the same exact moment as my speaking. In other situations where people aren't comfortable actually using the locker rooms, we are still allowing, and we put rubber matting all the way up the stairs and all along the front row of the bleachers in all of our buildings. So players that don't want to go into the locker room still have the opportunity to come dressed, put on their skates in the front row of the bleachers, take their bag over to the bench, and then again, there's 20 to 30 seats on each side of the benches for them to get undressed after the session and then get into their car and go home. So I think we've created a really good environment. And I think, like I said, that most of the rinks I visited, even the ones that we don't operate, like Rob's and several others, everybody's creating an environment where the players are very, very safe, 6 feet apart, and still have the opportunity to use the locker room, don't use it if they choose, and still participate in the game. So
Great, thanks, Paul and Rob. Good job on that one. Looks like we got some questions here that just talk about, again, the spectators. First one is, if a parent is also the coach, does that count as the one spectator? By definition, no. The coach is separate from the spectator, so that's relatively easy. Rob and Paul, back to you guys again. Facility owners, do you have the right not to allow any spectators in at all?
Yes, that's actually in the guidance as well, that if you cannot safely social distance, you can ask or direct your spectators to wait outside the building.
And yes, I think, I've known some operators that have not allowed anybody in the buildings from day one, and it's their prerogative to continue to operate in a safe manner. And if they think that's the best way to operate, far be it from us or anybody else to tell them that that's incorrect. I know some parents don't love it, but the bottom line is everybody's going to run their building the way they see fit in order to keep everybody safe. And I would have no problem with somebody trying to be more safe rather than less safe.
And on that note, again, another question that's a tougher one. We have a lot of questions about, we have siblings of the kid who's on the ice. Can we bring them with us? Again, the guidance from the state says that there's 1 spectator per player. And that's what the guidance from the state says. And that's as far as we can interpret that. And that's as far as we probably should interpret that. So not ideal for a lot of people, but that is, again, state's guidance for us. And limits what we can do in that area. Coaches, do they need to wear a mask even when they're on the ice, i.e. during skill sessions and practices? That answer is yes. And this is not hockey specific. Everything we're talking here are all sports. Coaches are supposed to be wearing masks at all times, and that is a requirement from the state. Let's see here. Paul, this one gets to go to you. If a positive case happens and a facility needs to shut down and clean and sanitize, are we compensated for the game if it needs to be canceled? At what point do we need to quarantine ourselves? Go Bruins. I agree with that. So if it's a game that has to be canceled, how do you want to handle that?
Well, I think as anybody who's ever played in the Valley League knows, you're billed for a game that's played. So if the rink is shut down, if there's a power outage, if there's a blizzard in the state of emergency, nobody's charged for a game that actually is canceled due to a facility shut down. So of course we would never require that. Basically, we're going to handle this like any other facility, whether it's a restaurant, a golf course, a hockey rink. You shut down the facility, you cleanse it, you do the contact tracing that's required by the state, and then it's allowed to reopen at whatever point in time that the Board of Health feels comfortable. Of course, nobody would ever be charged for any ice time that's required in the interim within that 10, 12, 14 days. So that's kind of where we're at on that point. Great.
Bob, I'm going to throw this one to you. We've talked a little bit about the face shield cages and what the requirements are, as well as if they're wearing that and do the kids still have to wear a face mask on the bench? How is that safe? You want to kind of tackle that one for us?
Yeah, the current guidance in place is that they have to wear a face mask on the bench and social distance. Obviously there'll be some issues or some difficulty in doing that, but I'm also aware that people ski in face masks all the time. So it could be possible that they could wear the face mask throughout or have the ability to pull it up. Obviously, we said earlier, we're trying to get clarification and or a modification on the face mask on the bench requirement if they are socially distanced. But until we do so, that's the current guidance that's been issued.
Awesome. Again, we're coming back to a few questions on the benches. Again, yes, there are going to be some rinks that can't accommodate a game by these definitions. Hopefully that's resolved sooner rather than later from the perspective of loosening of restrictions. But, or if a rink can't expand their benches, they do have other options, meaning they can put dividers up, as Rob kind of talked about. Again, not perfect, but most of the rinks do have the ability to expand their benches. They'll roll down some rubber matting, they'll put chairs out, and those areas will be made available to the players. Let's see here. Here's another one that we seen quite a bit, and this one's fluid. Rhode Island and players from Rhode Island coming into Massachusetts. I haven't seen any latest updates from the state in the last 24 hours as far as a loosening of restrictions for the state of Rhode Island. But regardless of whether or not you're on a roster in Massachusetts, if you're a citizen of Rhode Island and that's where you reside, you'll still be held to those rules. So coming into Massachusetts would require, in theory, a negative test or a 14-day quarantine, which is obviously not very realistic. Those are the rules as they are right now. And that's, again, not anything that we have any say over. That's the state and the numbers. So hopefully, again, those numbers get better and better, and Rhode Island gets opened back up from a border perspective, and then we don't have to deal with those issues. But that is the rule, the way it's kind of written at the moment. Face gaiters, a lot of questions about that. As of right now, the state does have some loose definitions of what a face covering is, and we'll share that with everyone on our website. But a face gaiter, even with recent surveys and studies that are showing maybe it's not as effective as people would like, that is still allowed by the state guidelines. So as of right now, face gaiters are allowed. Again, the difficulty of wearing a face covering underneath the helmet while you're on the bench is one of the reasons we've appealed to the state with our sports specific guidance. And again, very hopeful that we are able to have that requirement removed. We don't want players taking their helmets off on the bench. That's against a USA Hockey rule. Helmets are required on the bench. So a face gaiter would be probably the best case scenario to try and pull up underneath the mask. Again, not ideal. So we hope to get some additional guidance from the state sooner rather than later. Let's see here.
Hey, Kev, can I answer one? There's a lot coming in with regards to adult hockey and everything else. And I just want
Yeah.
to make the point clear that these rules that we're talking about for officials and players all require, are for all hockey, not just youth hockey. It's for all hockey. So, you know, the leagues need to think about that. The locker rooms aren't going to be just open for the players after the game. So this is for all hockey.
Great. Thank you for that. Let's see here. Several questions, and I'm sure many of you saw the article that was in the Boston Globe over the weekend talking about a player contracting the virus from traveling to a different state and then coming back with it. Again, we understand there are nothing that stops you from going within state boundaries outside of the mask guidance, meaning if the state allows us to travel to New Hampshire or Connecticut for games, then we can do so. Mass hockey is going to sanction rosters, and as long as you're following, your program is following the rules of gatherings and whatnot, you're going to be eligible to do what you want in that case. A couple quick points to that story. By all accounts, and what we've been able to determine is that there was one team, primarily from New York, who was infected. And they played a number of games in Connecticut, we're told, as well as had a player who was from Massachusetts playing with them. And that player contracted the virus. Here's the good news, in theory. They played several games. There were no other teams reporting any virus spread. So whatever happened within that team dynamic did not happen on the ice, because other teams would have been reporting it, and there would have been many more cases that would have been part of this outbreak. So that's something just to be aware of. Our position is that we're trying to make hockey as safe as possible. We're not saying that there's a zero chance of communicating the disease, but we are simply saying that you definitely need to do what we're asking, do it in the right way, and make sure that you're safe. So hopefully that covers a little bit of that. But again, we are going to sanction rosters. We're going to allow programs to play in states that they're allowed to travel to. If you take your team to Nashville, be prepared to come back and get negative tests or have a 14-day quarantine for your team. If you take your team to New Hampshire, there's no quarantine requirement and there's no testing requirement. So at this point, we will allow that from a governing body standpoint. And if the state changes those rules, and they certainly could, then we would encourage and require everyone to follow those rules from the state. Number of coaches. We're going to ask the teams try and limit their coaches. I think in one of the documents we sent to the state, we had a limit of 3. USA Hockey doesn't allow any more than 4 coaches on a bench. The state has not said anything more to that I'm aware of. Bob, am I missing something on that, or is there a limit that you haven't seen anything, right?
No, but they just would still have to be physically distanced as well.
Correct.
And wear a face mask.
Yep. So we're going to ask teams to try and limit how many coaches you have on the bench, obviously. With the younger ages, we know a lot of coaches like to be out there and have as many as you can. But again, in the interest of safety, try and be as respectful of the process as possible. Let's see here.
Kev, I see a number of questions about ADM and cross-ice mites or half-ice
Great.
mite games. We could talk with the facility operators, but I think, instead of having 2 teams on a bench, you could possibly see teams using the 2 entrance doors to the rinks, so you could separate the teams, 4 in each quadrant of the rink to do that. But that's going to be up to each facility on how they handle that, and the ability to able to stay within their head counts and limits on whether they're going to be able to do half-ice games of 4 teams involved at that time.
And
To answer another
Bob,
question.
I can address that a little bit in that, a lot of the facilities we use and, some of the requests we're going to have from teams is, there's, for the most part, they're playing 4-on-4. We would ask that most teams limit their rosters to 8 players. So 8 players and a goalie. So you're looking at a goaltender and 2 lines is what we see as kind of the standard. Some teams get a little larger. We understand that. And a number of logistics may not always work out. But what we're looking at now is when you've got 2 teams sharing a bench, you're looking at 8 6-year-olds or 8, 7-year-olds sitting on a bench. So for the most part, we found that it's pretty easy to accommodate. And when you're talking about extending the benches down to the end and providing extra seats, generally it's something that can certainly be accommodated. We very rarely see with the cross ice, more than 10 players on a team. And I think it's something that we're going to talk to each program about. And if there's a special situation, we can address that. But for the most part, I think it's more than achievable, and it's certainly, easier to handle that than it is, a 15-man bantam roster. So I don't think that's going to be a big major issue. And we did, in the first year that we actually operated, cross ice mites, for the first season, we actually put benches on the opposite side of the rink. So we had teams coming in from both the bench side and the opposite side. But, from what I've seen over the last 5 years now, we fine-tuned this cross ice, mite situation to the point where I think it's easily achievable, and social distancing will not be a problem.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Try and blow through some of these here. It's we're getting late, and we got a lot of questions still out there. So we're gonna do our best to get to as many of these as possible. But if we don't get to this, certainly don't be shy to reach out to us after the fact if you still have questions via email, and we'll happily answer any questions that are out there. If players are wearing mouth guards and face coverings on the ice, are they allowed to pull the coverings down to get a drink on the bench? Absolutely they are. They can take a drink. They're required to have their own water bottle. Coaches are not allowed to bring water bottles for the team anymore. Each player is required to have their own if they want it. So that's just common sense, I think, at this point, but want to make sure we state that. No mention of timekeepers, same as usual. Yes, timekeepers will be wearing a face covering. They'll be doing their job just as they normally would, and working within the facility on their game sheets and doing that. So that is standard operating procedure. Let's see here. Rob, can you talk a little bit about, you're the resident expert on air circulation, question about just how quickly it can recirculate and what the indoor versus outdoor concept is there.
Okay, so ice rinks, you're familiar with, we're a very large volume of air in the building. Most of us have about 900,000 cubic feet of air in our buildings, and we're exchanging the air, and each rink is a little different in what equipment they have. But most of us are doing about 10,000 CFM of air exchange, cubic feet per minute. So there's a tremendous turnover in the air. That's just part of keeping the environment inside and keeping the air fresh. So we're monitoring for carbon dioxide levels inside the building. That's what we're exhaling when we're breathing, and we're bringing in fresh air constantly. So from that perspective, we may not be quite as desirable as outside from a safety perspective, but we are better than almost any other indoor facility or building you're going to go to, whether it's a supermarket or a restaurant or something else, because of that huge volume of air.
Thank you. Some specific questions, we'll try and hit these as well, but so the center has to wear a mask to take the face off. Is he or she expected to finish the shift with a mask or just jump off the ice for an unmasked player? That's up to the player. If they want to finish the shift, they can. If they're not comfortable skating with the mask on or can't manage to have it kind of fall down while they're playing, then they can certainly come off the ice for a new player. And one of the nice things about hockey is we do have free substitution, so you don't have to wait to a whistle. So if the player wants to take the draw and hop off the ice, they certainly could do that. What about interstate play for juniors? New Hampshire's not implementing any of these restrictions. How are kids going to play in New Hampshire or other states reasonably expected to turn off their checking mentality when they come play a team in Mass? You've been doing it a long time. Certain games have checking in summer leagues. You don't have checking. You do it in practice. I mean, players are pretty smart. We trust that they're going to be pretty resilient in how they handle this. And I would also anticipate that there's a number of leagues that probably will limit their games, especially at the junior level, to states that allow certain styles of play. Not sure, because that junior hockey is outside of our purview, but that would be just a possibility. So, but we have faith that the players are going to be able to understand and play within the rules on any given game. And coaches, you got to remind your players before the game, if they are used to playing a checking game and this happens to be a non-checking game, make sure they know that so that there's no issues. How should organizations handle tryouts where pennies are normally used to identify each participant? I would say you probably need to make sure you're sanitizing them in some capacity, obviously, before they go back out. Additional pennies purchased possibly would be a way to limit how many are used at any given time. But again, be cautious there and be smart with how you handle it. I'm not sure we can really guide you much beyond that. Can you clarify how play is to be regulated in puck battles? Intermittent contact is what we're trying to limit. Full body contact, intentional body checking is what we've removed. So, the game will still take place, but body checking and anything that is perceived to be a body check is going to be penalized. And I think that's the best answer we can give on that one. Let's see here. Leagues that maybe have checking in New Hampshire and again, not in Massachusetts. Many first-year bantams haven't learned checking yet. How does Mass Hockey plan to keep kids safe if they can't be taught checking in Mass? Great question, and I think that will be a question that each program maybe brings to their league. And talking about first-year bantam hockey, maybe as a league that they decide that first-year bantam there's not going to be checking in any state. They certainly have the ability to do that at the league level, and it would encourage you to bring that up at the league meeting. Let's see here. Any suggested practices for sharing or not sharing goalie equipment at the mite squirt level for rotating goalies? Tom, the safety issue on this, and just, we know that past the pads, especially at the younger ages, is a concept that, we all utilize at certain times. Any thoughts on some safety issues there?
Yeah, just in terms of any distribution from equipment to different players, we're really trying to cut down and minimize the skin-to-skin contact, and obviously bodily fluids leaving the body being distributed through equipment. So I would say it would be best not to do that and to really minimize. It's like, why aren't we just putting 6 water bottles on a bench? Well, we want every player to have their own water bottle so they're not going back and forth, and we're trying to reduce the risk of the particles being on one water bottle and going to another person. So I would say it's best to reduce that limit and not distribute from player to player to be as safe as possible.
Great. What about goalies? Are they going to be, how are they going to wear a mask under their goalie helmet? Again, a goalie does not need to wear a mask when he's on the ice. Players on the ice don't need to wear them unless they're taking a face-off. I have not seen a goalie take a face-off in all my years around the rink, so that's a good sign. So hopefully that is something that we don't have to deal with. Let's see here. Paul, why don't you jump on this one? If a cluster hits a certain area, how will the league handle that? And I think you kind of covered this, but you want to just hit that quickly?
Yeah, I think, we can't address every different possible scenario, but what we're going to do is, when a situation occurs and we see a positive test, we're going to address it. We're going to address it within the state protocol and do what they require, provide the contact tracing, have everybody tested, and see where we stand from there. Well, when we talk about a cluster, I mean, what does a cluster mean? I don't understand if you're talking about a positive testing in that respect or a positive testing within a certain region, but every situation is going to be addressed and dealt with within the state guidelines and within our league protocol. So if multiple teams become infected, yes, we'll shut down multiple teams. If multiple teams infect other teams, then we're going to have to address, and I think the state will address, and we'll be working with the Department of Health in the area to, is this an unsafe environment? And at that point, we will address that. But for the most part, when a player tests positive, the protocol will be that player, we need to contact trace and make sure that every player within that same team, coach, anybody that came in contact with them, any of the opposing teams are all tested and make sure that they are negative. And if there is an outbreak, then we're going to deal with it and we're going to talk with the Department of Health. And it's not just a facility issue; it then becomes, a program, a town, or a league issue. So we're going to deal with it appropriately, and we're going to deal with it in every situation as it occurs. And I can't say much more than that. I know I keep getting questions about what if this, what if that, but we're going to address each situation with safety first, and we're going to make sure that we keep all the players and all the parents and all the families safe.
Yep, great. That's thank you for that. And Just while we're talking here, got a quick email from Paul Schwabe from the South Shore Conference talking about ADM. They're going to limit the number of games for ADM style games, cross ice games, to 1 per rink at any given time. So again, that's how the South Shore Conference will be dealing with that. So thanks, Paul, for tuning in tonight and sharing that information with us. Here's a question. I wear glasses to see at a distance. My glasses fog up with a mask on. Would you suggest I scrap the glasses or wear them and risk not being able to see clearly? I'm going to not make any suggestions. I'm going to let you make that decision, and you need to figure out, I guess, how you can best navigate that. That's not a recommendation that we're going to make either way, outside of if the rules require you to have a mask on, then you're expected that you would have a mask on, and that's the only answer we can give you there. How will parity work? I'm going to let that's a league question for several different leagues. We're not going to get into that one tonight, but I'm sure you can reach out to your league organizers or program, and they'll be able to share that information with people soon. Are nonprofit organizations protected under USA Hockey's insurance blanket with COVID-19? In general, the COVID-19, my understanding is an exclusion, but there is coverage in place, and that would be best asked of Steve Fitzgerald, the risk manager for Massachusetts Hockey, on specific questions about that. I don't want to try and give any general terms here for fear that it's misunderstood. And I prefer that anyone has questions about the COVID-19 risk management policy, reach out directly to the risk manager for their district or the state. Let's see here.
Hey, Kev, can I jump in one thing there? So
Yeah, please do.
With the contact tracing, I just want to put it out there for the officials, because don't forget, you're going from rink to rink. So it's quite important that if there's a signers on here and everything else, that we do completely work together, notifying the different signers that if you've been notified that you've been in contact with somebody, as long as you can, and contact the leagues and everything else, because we need to make sure that we're contacting all the officials in the leagues that you have been in proximity with. So please make sure you're talking to your assigners if you've been contacted.
Thanks, Kev. Bob, this goes back a little bit, and I'll try and tackle this one as well, to the tournament question. But the question is, if you play 2 games in a day, does it have to be against the same opponent, or can you play 2 different opponents in the same day? And our understanding and what we've been told by the state is you can play 2 different opponents. You can't do it in a tournament format, and that's the catch. So if you're doing it under what is referred to as scheduled play or league play, then you certainly have that ability to do so. There's not a requirement that it's 2 games against the same team in a day. Kev, here's a question back to you on the officiating side. What do we use for a whistle until we receive our electronic whistle? You want to tackle that one for us?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. If you can blow your whistle under your mask, that would be the only way right now that we would tell you to do that. We're going to work as quick as we can to get those electronic whistles, or you can try to acquire one yourself right now.
Great. Any guidelines, Kev, back to you again. Whistle stoppage for a shot on goal, and there's a rebound with multiple players competing for the puck. I assume this is something to a quick whistle, but I'll let you tackle that one.
Yeah, there's judgment will come into this. If it's a rebound right out and everything else, we're going to let that play. What we're talking about is those gatherings in the corner and everything else where that puck is tied up. We want to blow those plays dead quicker than let them battle for the puck in the corner. So that's what we're talking about that way. The goalie's got the puck really quick. You see that save. Yeah, we want to stop that play right away and stop the players from coming in and crashing the net. But if the puck is loose and a big rebound, we got to let that play. Yes, for the coaches and parents out there, there may be some quick whistles that you may not like. Again, as I mentioned before, that's part of this right now. It's not a mistake. It's just that we're going to have to sometimes err on caution and everything else like that. So that's part of back to playing right now.
Great, thank you. What are the spacing requirements between games to allow inward and outward flow of people from the rink? In games I've seen taking place recently, and the inward and outward flow with one entrance and one exit, the 10 minutes to do the ice cut has been working very well. Rob, Paul, either of you guys have any thoughts on that? I think the 10-minute window has been a pretty good one. Would you concur?
Yeah, so like I said, what we're generally doing right now is not allowing teams to maintain the locker room for the entire game and come back in and change. We're asking them to come dressed, use the locker room to get dressed for the start of the game, and then take their bags to the other side of the building and get undressed in those chairs. So therefore, there's no need to stagger because these people have been now gone for almost an hour, and allows the facility managers to come in, clean the facility, clean that area, clean the locker rooms, and it gives them almost 50 minutes. So that's what we're doing right now. And I think it's kind of the best solution that we've come up with in the short term. And then we'll see how things go in the next, 60, 90 days.
I'd agree with that. And I think, again, where each facility is a little different, and as long as we can set up traffic flows that safely get people in and out without a lot of close proximity time, then we're going to be able to do it in that 10 minutes. Some facilities don't have that luxury, and they're going to have to space that window out a little more.
Great, thanks. Another question, and I'll just hit this one quickly on checking and the removal. Will players be penalized for checking since it's difficult for them to change how they play? Yes, they will be penalized. The rule is no checking, and if they violate that rule, they'll receive a penalty. There won't be any warnings. It'll be simply a minor penalty unless they cause an injury, which then, Kevin, I think is a major in a game, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Can the spectator change each game? Example, mom goes to one game, dad goes to the next game. Absolutely. We're not saying only one person gets to go this year. It's definitely something that you can alternate out, and we encourage you to. And I'm not shilling for live barn whatsoever, but those facilities that do have live barn, I'm sure that they're going to see an uptick in their subscriptions over the next month here in Massachusetts. So we will send out information on the roster dates and the rules changes. There is an article on the website already there that lists a lot of that, but we can make sure that that's sent out again as well. This one, I'm not sure it's entirely, the question says, I saw the Mass Hockey memo posted last month that registration was down sharply over the same period last year. Actually, in Massachusetts, we've been actually ahead of the rest of the country in registrations. I think across the country, we're seeing a decline based on people not being sure of what play was going to be available. But I think in Massachusetts, we've been doing a good job. A lot of people are coming back to the rinks. So the follow-up to that says, did the numbers go up since then? Where does Mass Hockey stand now compared to last year? Wondering if we're going to see fewer players on teams or fewer teams as a result. I think it's realistic to think that there will be a decline in registrations this year. That's just, I think, consistent with both the safety issues and the economic impact that this has had on families. Some people aren't comfortable going back to the rink, and we certainly support that belief. I think, unfortunately, there are going to be families that maybe don't have the disposable income to spend on hockey that they maybe did in the past, and it's unfortunate. Hopefully, programs are able to work in some capacity with families, but we do anticipate that there will be a decline, but not a significant one this year. Will players' guardian be allowed in the locker room at the Mitons court level to tie skates? I think the answer there is no. The locker rooms, because the numbers are limited, if they're even opened, you will not be allowed in there, but the players certainly will have areas where they can be out, whether it's chairs or bench areas outside of the locker room, where a parent would be able to tie the skates for the younger kids who are unable to do so. So hopefully that helps there. Can parents split spectator time during the game? I don't see why not. Again, for those who are allowing spectators in, if one person leaves and the other one comes in, I don't see that being of significant concern. Ultimately, the goal is to keep the number of parents or spectators down in general. So will the rink specific, I'm losing my language here. Will these rink specific guidelines be available before we go to the rink, i.e. not allowing the spectators? I would strongly encourage program leaders and league leaders to share information within the facilities that you'll be using and what those rules and guidelines will be. So facilities will have their policies. They'll share them with their leagues. They'll post them on their website, and parents all should know well ahead of time what each rink is allowing or not allowing in that case. So sharing of information is extremely valuable. If we have a health condition preventing us from wearing a mask, will we not be admitted to the rink? The state has some specific guidelines on what we can or cannot prevent. Rob, I'll throw that one to you.
And I think this is going to be up to each individual operator, whether they're going to allow a person without a face covering in. I will say that you are not allowed to question a person who states that they cannot wear a mask for health reasons. You don't have the right to ask them what their health issues are or question their statement. So it's going to be up to operators whether they feel that they can maintain safety and they can social distance and allow that to happen, or whether they just don't allow that person into the building.
Thank you. And I think key point there again, spectators are required to social distance. So that leads nicely into this next question. If a coach is a single parent and has to bring siblings to the rink to coach the team, can the siblings come into the rink? Well, the first thing is the siblings, or sibling, I guess would be the easier answer, would need to be able to understand how to social distance and limit themselves. They couldn't be running around and, you know, the good old days of all the younger brothers and sisters having a fun time in the stands while the parents are watching games. That's probably not happening anymore, at least in this term. So I think if the kids can manage to social distance and stay on their own, then certainly I don't see any concern there. Any issues with kids coming in from out of state to play if they're rostered on a mass team? I kind of covered that. You know, if you're from Rhode Island, yeah, there's a big problem because Rhode Island people are not allowed to come into Massachusetts without having a negative test or a quarantine period. If you're from New Hampshire, there's free travel in between, so there wouldn't be any limitation there as an example. So again, state guidance on who we're able to travel with and what the travel bans look like. That's ultimately going to be the determining factor there. Let's see here. Appreciate this offer. Is there anything we can do to help with the further improvements for gameplay or practice, i.e. contact state reps or senators, give info to local board of health? I think we've had a lot of communication. I will say this, the lieutenant governor and her staff have been extremely supportive of the efforts here to get youth sports into a safe environment and have been very, very helpful in this process. There is a lot of support at the state level. Obviously, there's a lot of concern as well, and that's rightfully so, but we do have a lot of support, and we're hopeful that, again, that additional guidance that will be coming will be favorable. So let's see here. Please do not blow off goalie safety. How are scrums in front of the net? Goalies are on the ice the entire game and exposed the most. I don't think we're blowing off any safety issues, to be honest. The game is going to be played, and if a parent or a goalie doesn't feel that they are in a safe environment, they certainly have the option not to play. I don't think we can remove the ability of a player to skate, in a certain area. The crease is there to protect a goalie. Obviously, the creases will not be increased in size. That's not anything we've seen or had any discussions of, but certainly the referees can do a good job there. And Kevin, maybe jump on this one yet again on just the quick whistle and how we can protect goalies.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. The quick whistle, as I said, we may blow that whistle and the puck may come loose. We're going to protect it. We want to stop people from just congregating and really crashing that net quickly. So we will instruct all officials to have a quick whistle in that area.
Great, thanks. This one is, I'm going to defer to some state language, but the question says, if a team has a player infected, does the entire team need to be tested or sit 14 days? I would refer you back to the state guidance. Tom, do you have any thoughts on that particular subject? I know that there's, the term close contact is one that's used on testing and quarantining, but I'll let you handle that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a player on a team is tested positive. I think common sense would say, better be safe than sorry, and that everyone on the team, including the coaches, and then do the contact tracing. The parents, if that parent came in contact with the player to another parent, just be smart. But it would be of our recommendation and mine personally to absolutely better be safe than sorry, because you don't know how you're going to transmit that. And considering how insidious and how infectious this virus is, it would be of a strong recommendation to have everyone tested.
Awesome, thank you. Who's responsible for paying for COVID testing? Individuals. That's not something that Mass Hockey has any responsibility for, or the ability to do, and that's not an area that we would ever want to get involved in necessarily. So again, another liability question. Let's defer that to the risk management group for specific questions. And our risk managers are available to assist and help. And there is some guidance on both the USA Hockey websites and Mass Hockey website as well for that. But specific questions are probably most importantly reached out to the risk managers. Let's see here. When it comes to girls who typically don't wear shirts under their gear, are you allowing them to close the locker room doors and asking them to change out in the open after the game? I would encourage any player, male or female, to prepare themselves for, potentially being in a locker room scenario where the door may or may not open. I don't want to say what someone should or shouldn't do. It's up to each individual to manage that on their own personal level and where their comfort level is. So, are you discouraging teams from arriving early to games for off-ice warm-ups? Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, that's probably just not as important a factor. Players certainly can stretch on their own, can do some things if they need to, but the team building and camaraderie that takes place, and coaches telling players to be at the ice an hour and a half before the games, you're not going to be allowed in the buildings for starters. So, there are lots of ways that people can get themselves ready for games, but in this current environment, I would say that that's probably not an ideal way to do it. Let's see here. Does Mass Hockey have any guidance on development programs like Learn to Skate, Learn to Play, and Try Hockey for Free? Absolutely. Mike Diorio is our program services coordinator. His information is available on our website. I strongly encourage all of our programs to reach out to Mike. He can provide you with all kinds of information for those types of events. And given the fact that we'll probably see some programs that are down in registration numbers this year, might be a great year to take on a Try Hockey for Free Day or things of that nature and welcome people to the rink. How about players who opt out? Will they get their USA Hockey fee refunded or put out till next year? I'm not aware of any changes that USA Hockey has made in their no refund policy, although I can guess that there may be some discussion that takes place. As of right now, I'm not aware of any, but that is certainly a possibility down the road, but that's as far as I would take that one. How often will out-of-state players need to get tested if they play for a Mass team? Let's see, a player lives in Rhode Island but plays on a Mass team. It's state guidance. That's not a Mass Hockey rule. That's whatever the state of Massachusetts is requiring at the time. Let's see here. Can you please clarify contact in practices? Again, contact is tried to be minimized at this point. Checking is not allowed in games, is not allowed in practices either, but we are able to be at level 3, which means you can run drills where players are in proximity when needed. But again, be smart. We don't need to have contact drills taking place right now. Teach the skills. Let's get the kids back on the ice. Let's get them playing the games and having some fun, and we can go forward from there. So I know our goal here was to try and get everyone out before the opening face-off for the Bruins game at 8:04 right now. I think we just came in under the whistle. Well, last question here, and we'll call it on this one. Will state tournaments be canceled for this year, or will they be held later in the season? We don't have any answers on the state tournaments, both national bound and non-national bound at this point. There will be some discussions taking place. We've just gotten the guidance to allow games. We're hopeful that we can run them in some capacity, but we don't know what they're going to look like today. But trust me that those conversations will be taking place. So hopefully we get everything up and running. And if everyone does their job, if everyone tries to stay safe, we'll do our best to be one of the leaders in the industry. We hope that the hockey families are leaders among youth sports. We hope that this is something that slowly but surely goes away, that the vaccine comes and we can start to really navigate back to what our traditional games are. We really appreciate everyone's time tonight. This has been absolutely a great opportunity. It could have gone on, I'm sure, a lot longer. There are a lot of questions. If you're not sure you got your question answered, reach out to us. We'll definitely communicate and try and make sure everyone knows what is expected of them and what ways we can help. On that note, and we'll let everyone else go. Thank you to the panel. Again, a very, very helpful panel tonight. A lot of great answers and a lot of other people behind the scenes that have been part of this. We're the faces that are on the screen tonight, but many other league operators, facility operators, and program administrators have been extremely helpful throughout the past few months. we're not done with this yet, but we're certainly headed in the right direction. Thank you to everyone, and most importantly, thank you to over 2,500 people who watched this tonight. Hopefully we gave you the answers you want, and we look forward to continuing to help you along the way. So with that, for no further ado, have a great night. We'll see you all at the rink soon.